Hello there.
The heck is that?
Hello, everyone. As you see, I'm sporting some fangs here. Welcome to episode 1 of Heroic Hunts. Now, so glad you guys could join us this afternoon on another chilling October evening. This is going to be episode 1 in a 7 to 8 part series where we will be diving into supernatural, spooky, haunting, chilling, thrilling characters featured in comics. Pretty much any kind of comic version. Now, we will be focusing on specific characters and specific comics and stuff for this first season. So, for example, as you've seen, tonight's topic is vampires. Now, we're not going to cover all the vampires in comics. We may mention them and stuff, but the goal is in later seasons we'll get to those. So if we don't get to one of your favorites, we will later on. So to begin tonight, I am your host, Lemus, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Digital Dachi. And yeah, so tonight we're talking vampires in comics, in popular comics, popular vampiric characters. Dachi, do you have any thoughts before we dive into it? Do you have any opening thoughts or things to say about vampires in general?
Um, they're one of my favorite supernatural beings.
Right, right. I mean,
Have you ever
it's an
watched the movie where
iconic.
Bon Jovi was a vampire?
I have not. I want to. I
Good
know
movie.
of it. I know of it, but I've not seen it. Um, yeah, I mean, vampires are some of the oldest forms of terror in the night, right? They from Nosferatu, Dracula, the infamous White Zombie movie, which actually it's called White Zombie, but it actually was a vampire movie. And then even to modern day stuff, you've got like Dracula Untold, 30 Days of Night. Um, it spanned like the story of vampires and Dracula and the blood sucking monsters that they are with the fangs and the aversion to sunlight and garlic or garlic, depending on where you're from.
New
Um,
Orleans.
Nolans, garlic, got keep away from that garlic. Um, they're it spans everything. They're extremely popular. I mean, there's kind of certain rules. Again, there's always certain set of rules. With vampires, you gotta don't look into the eyes. They have hypnotism. They have super
They
speed,
do
strength.
have hypnotism.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying. They do.
That's
Did
how
I
I.
say don't?
No, I'm
Oh,
agreeing.
oh, okay. Sorry, I've messed my mark there a little bit. But yeah, so but they in some forms they can transform into bats or animals. Um, and they have aversion to sunlight. Usually, wooden stake to the heart does it. Cutting the head off with some vampires in some cases. They have a insatiable thirst for blood. Usually, pale skin, fangs, claws. The whole nine works.
Whole nine works. You mean whole 9 yards?
Yeah, yeah. That's what I meant.
Or in their case, courts. Huh. But
Whole nine quarts. I get it. I like it. I like that. Um, yeah. So I'm excited to start the series off with a bang. So basically, the idea is to introduce you guys to characters you may or may not know and give you some information you may or may not. But it'll be fun for us to discuss and kind of go back and forth. Some of it I didn't know until I looked it up and researched it. So some of this may be even new for you, Dachi. I don't know. Some of it you may have known or not. Either way, I think it'll be pretty fascinating to get into. So, speaking of iconic vampires, I'm going to start, and I'll set up the whole introduction here for him in a second. I just want to start, and let me ask you something. When you hear vampire, let's be honest, we've already said it. The most infamous, most recognizable name in the vampire universe is Dracula. Vlad the Impaler. Vlad,
God,
Vlad
you
the
really messed
Impaler.
that one up.
Count Dracula, Count Dracul, 1, 2. Um,
One smack a do smack a ah.
exactly. So
Only certain people's gonna
Dracula,
get that. That bit's for me. That's just for me.
it's just for
Sorry.
him. Inside jokes with himself. Um,
You know what
sometimes you
goes
gotta
on
have those.
inside my head.
Right. Um,
Like I live rent
Dracula
free there, and it's just not a fun time.
Dracula's been around obviously since Bram Stoker, based on a real count of Vlad the Impaler. Um, it's age old thing, but he has found his way into multiple comic streams. Now he's found his way into Marvel comics pretty exclusively, DC comics. I think it said what was the other one that it had? He's been in a lot of comics. The actual character of Dracula. Um, but tonight, for this episode, for this season one episode, we are going to focus on DC's Dracula. So let's pull up some shots of him there and start talking DC's Dracula. So go with me here.
Okay, you're at the.
So
Hold on, I lost something. Okay, here we go.
okay,
All right, he's up. He's up now.
okay. All right, we're good to go. Okay, so Count Dracula in the DC Comics universe, also known as Detective Comics, um, also known
I'll
in
be
DC
honest.
Comics.
As much as
Yes.
they've called it DC Comics, I never really put together it was Detective Comics. I was always called it DC. I didn't know that it was that, but I thought they meant
It's
that more
just
so when it was Batman.
right. That's fair. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here.
No,
I
I don't
assume
think
that's
you're
right.
wrong. I'm pretty sure you're right.
Count Dracula in DC Comics is also known as Count Romanov. Is he any relation to like the Russian Romanovs, or I have no idea. Um, it says here his first appearance within DC Comics was Beowulf #4. I actually didn't even know that DC Comics did a Beowulf comic.
Yeah,
Beowulf, as you know, was like a huge, also
Monster
folklore
Slayer.
kind of tale. Yeah. It's a big thing we learned a lot about in high school.
He slept with Angelina Jolie.
Well, that's true too. And then they had a giant troll baby, and then there was a dragon involved somehow. Just a lot of weird things. But for Dracula's case, at least within the DC universe, his abilities, and let me tell you, it's going to sound pretty familiar. It's pretty run of the mill. Vampirism, duh. Enhanced senses, duh. Immortality, well, I mean, apparently not, as we will come to find out. Not completely immortal. Invulnerability, not as we will come to find out. He's still immune to Vampire 101, which we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Regeneration, superhuman speed, strength, stamina. This Dracula, I will say, this vampire, he does have psychokinesis, which is clairvoyance, mind control, telepathy, transformation, and metamorphosis. He also has intimidation and occultism listed as abilities. So that's fascinating. Even though like there wasn't a whole lot to be found on him, and like I said, when we was doing research, the biggest thing when you think DC's Dracula, you think Batman vs. Dracula, or Batman and Dracula. Um,
He had a
which
really good
actually
movie with The Batman, which was that animated
that's
series
what I was
back
going to ask
in
you about. See, I didn't get to
2000.
see that one, but I knew of it, but I didn't get to watch it.
Dracula spends most of the movie trying to turn Batman into a bat. That way he can control him because this Batman, or this Dracula, excuse me, can control those he has infected with vampirism. So, or at least that
So
was how it was in the movie.
okay, so I'm gonna read you what I found here in the comics version, and I'm guessing from what you're saying, the movie sounds like it did kind of play off of the comics version. Then, so in the comics, ironically, the first one is the Batman and Dracula trilogy. Consisted of three American graphic novels: Batman and Dracula Red Rain, which came out in 1991, the year we were born. Batman and Dracula Bloodstorm came out the year our producer and my wife was born, and Crimson Mist, which came out in 1998.
Do we
So
know
these were
anybody born in
written.
'98?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe one of my cousins or brother-in-law. Maybe I don't know for sure, but we'll, we'll find out. I look forward to your letters. Written by Doug, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Minch, maybe it's
I think
Moench.
it's Monch.
Minch, and it was penciled by Kelly Jones. The books were published by DC Comics as part of its Elsewhere line of comics, set outside the DC universe and Bram Stoker's literary canon. The trilogy begins with a parallel universe counterpart of Batman discovering Count Dracula and his minions feeding off of the homeless of Gotham City. This Batman becomes a vampire to gain the necessary strength to defeat Dracula, in which his disguise as a strange creature of the night has become a horrific reality after saving the city. And actually, when I was reading a little more on it, I didn't actually save this part down, but since you mentioned it in the thing, it did mention that basically it was kind of similar, where Dracula was controlling the people he had turned and sending them after Batman, and then Batman somehow used that to turn himself into a vampire. Basically, he let one of them feed off of him and turn himself, but since he wasn't fed on by Dracula directly, he wasn't controlled by Dracula. But then he used his vampire, and I think it said he ended up defeating Dracula by impaling him on like a power cable pole, like one of the big wooden power cable poles.
That would be weird.
Yeah, so
I
like
know in
the
the
whole
movie, he somehow, the Batman, which you have to call him by the in this one apparently,
right.
but Batman had somehow made a hole in the Batcave that when it started becoming daylight, he shined it through with a mirror or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well,
He
this
turned to
story
ash is
actually
all I know. It was in
this
the movie
story
though.
interesting didn't end with Dracula. That was just the first actual graphic novel. So apparently, um, after Batman uh actually kills Dracula, despite trying to use his powers for the benefits of his vigilante and vampire hunting activities, Batman finds himself unable to control his bloodlust and eventually kills the Joker before forcing Alfred Pennyworth and Commissioner Gordon to stake him. The stake is later removed by Alfred during a crime wave, and Batman slaughters almost all of his old foes and other criminals, after which survivors Two-Face and Killer Croc attempt to get rid of him once and for all. So
The
like
word attempt in there is a big one.
right. So like I'm really actually interested in finding these comics. I don't know where we'd find it, but I'm gonna
Probably
have to
on
look it
that.
up after this.
Probably on a certain website we may or may not use.
Right. Which I'm gonna look into it because all these sound fascinating. And I need to watch that movie too. I'll have to look up the Batman versus
I
Dracula.
didn't
But
watch the whole movie. I just seen clips like I often do, which kind of makes one of our buddies lose his mind. But I kind of get it. You
right.
don't
So I
get the
mean,
whole appreciation if you don't watch the whole film, but whatever.
but it's really interesting. They said that this kind of spawned that Elseworlds trilogy where they did these kind of non-canon kind of top stories for the DC universe, and introduced its own kind of version of Dracula, as you can see in the pictures that we showed. And it's very interesting. I think it's very fascinating. I actually quite enjoy the thought of it. Now, again, I do know there are versions of Dracula in Marvel comics and in other comics, which hopefully we'll get to in other episodes and seasons of Heroic Haunts. But like I said, we wanted to start with a little bit of DC. We've got two Marvel characters coming up, and so I didn't want to front load it too much. I wanted to keep a good mix here. So that
So,
is
but
my little bit of spiel on DC's Dracula.
before we move on to the next one,
Yes.
is there any stories that you've ever been told around our area about any kind of vampiric type
About
things?
vampires around us?
Yeah,
No,
I
I've not
hadn't
heard
either.
it.
I just didn't know if maybe you'd heard anything.
Yeah, like I mean, obviously, there's like
Because
I
it
said,
would
there's so many
always be
movie
kind of
stories.
fun to share if we had heard folk tales or whatever from our own areas, because
Right.
everywhere kind of has its
You
own
get back.
thing, right?
Yeah. You get back with me when we get to the witches and ghosts episodes. Sneak
You mean the
preview there.
fact that the Witches and Ghosts episode is going to be about 2 hours long? That's besides the point.
Right. I mean,
It won't be that long, but
well,
it's
actually,
still going to be a very long-ish episode when we get to that
there's
one.
definitely some discussions we can get into, and that may even be a separate spooky Halloween video, just talking about personal experiences and stuff. So that may be something to stay tuned for. In the meantime, I want to talk about a Marvel Comics character who y'all may know, one of the classic vampiric characters, or in this case, a half vampire. Um, so why don't we just wave the cloth with DC's Batman or DC's Dracula, DC's Batman, wave the cloth with Batman, yeah. DC's Dracula, and I want to slide in some Blade. I'm talking the
Okay,
Daywalker.
he's in
I'm
there. You
talking
took a hot minute, but I got him in there.
that's okay. As long as he's in there. Blade, the Daywalker, also known as Eric Brooks, which I gotta be honest, I didn't know that was his real name. Like, obviously, we all just know him as Blade. Eric Brooks kind of sounds like a lame name. I'm sorry, but like, I can see why he goes by Blade. I just dropped something floor. We're professionals here.
Yeah, we're doing great things here.
So yeah, I'm just my personal opinion. Eric Brooks is a terrible name for a dude that's a half vampire.
Well, to be
half vampire
fair, do you
hunter.
think he knew that he was half vampire at the time? Like, what do you?
Boy, do I have information for you.
I mean,
Let's get into it.
His mother made, I don't know, because I only know the movie part of it. I don't know comics. So
See, and I've not seen the movies. That's
you haven't seen the movies?
I want to. Me and my producer was literally just talking about we haven't seen the movies, and we kind of want to because they I've always wanted to. I've just never got around to it. His first appearance was in The Tomb of Dracula number 10, which came out July 1973 with Marvel Comics. It was written by Marv Wolfman. Not even kidding. The dude that made it, his last name was Wolfman. That's amazing. And penciled by Gene Colan. His abilities include master martial artist, a skilled swordsman and marksman, highly knowledgeable about vampire lore, superhuman strength, speed, stamina, and agility, enhanced senses, accelerated healing. He's immune to both vampire bites and hypnosis. Because he is a half vampire, he can't be turned or fully turned by vampire bites, and he also cannot be hypnotized by vampires. He's impervious to the hypnotism. He has slowed aging and an ability to sense supernatural creatures, which comes in handy when you're hunting vampires for a living. Which so does the ability to not be hypnotized or turned by them too. So he is what is called a Dompire or Dompire, which in Balkan's folklore are creatures that are a result of a union between a vampire and a mortal human. This union usually between male vampires and female mortal humans. The stories with female vampires mating with male humans are a lot more rare. So it's usually a guy vampire hooks up with a human lady. Occasionally it'll be a vampire lady and a human guy. It's just a lot more rare. But yeah, those are called Dompirs, Dhampirs. Sometimes it's spelled a little bit different. I digress. So Eric Brooks, there you go, was born in a brothel in the Soho neighborhood of London, England in 1929 to Tara Brooks, who was a prostitute for a better word. When she experienced severe labor complications, a doctor was called in. In actuality, this doctor was the vampire Deacon Frost, who killed his mom by drinking all of her blood. However, when he did this, he inadvertently passed on the enzymes to her baby boy as he was being born because she was in the middle of labor. So therefore, you get Blade, the part vampire, and that's also what prevents him from being turned by vampires. And he's also
kind of like the there's a Star Trek episode. I know it's a whole different thing, but there's a Star Trek episode where everybody turns into these monsters.
Yeah.
And the only thing that could save them was Data's cat Spot was pregnant and had a litter of kittens. Well, Spot turned into a lizard because this affected everything on the ship.
Jeez.
But since they were newborn babies, they had special things in the
enzymes.
Yeah, and it kept them from turning. Like they were completely immune, so they synthesized things. I don't know. It's a really cool episode.
It's very interesting.
But
it is
I like
anything
that is kind of like that. Like, I don't want to say stem cell research is a good thing because it's not, but there is scientific backing that if they could figure out a way to synthesize this stuff and not hurt anybody, we could be in a whole new medical era. Because stuff like that happens all the time. Like, the father or the mother would end up with like some kind of incurable disease, but the baby is spared because the fetus is just it's just weird. Kind of how they bred out a lot of real bad diseases. They would give somebody a disease, and then they'd have a kid, and then that disease would be less strong in that kid. I don't know.
Right. It had diluted it kind of, for
more
lack
or
of a better
less.
word. Yeah. Yeah, so this is where Blade kind of speculates he got his hatred of vampires was, the fact that one killed his mom and turned him into one as a baby. So I mean, some fun facts, which kind of I did mention. He is British, which is also I didn't know that either. It is very fascinating. I
Allow me
didn't
to
know
tell
he
you,
was
in the
British.
movie, he is not British.
We're right. And see, like I said, I've always seen like the trailers from the movie and stuff, and so I guess that's why I never put two and two together that he's British. But um, for Blade, ironically, Dracula is one of his arch enemies. Enemies. They have had countless encounters over the years, ever since Blade's first appearance in the tomb. Whoa, where did I go? Went way past my notes, buddy. In the Tomb of Dracula, Blade always puts down Dracula only for him to rise again, locked in an immortal death match. Most of these notes I got from comic book resources and Wikipedia for anybody that wants to do a little more digging. Obviously, there's more information and more research and
This
stuff to be
was
done there.
set. We should have prefaced it, I guess. This series was set as kind of like a dipping your toe into these characters
Right.
to kind
Just
of
an
just.
introduction to kind of, if, like I said, if you're something you're interested in, wanted a little more information about, a little more backstory, maybe like, I mean, again, like me, and even like Dachi was saying, most of my knowledge about Blade was I'd seen the trailers and advertisements and stuff for the movie, and I had seen him in like video games and like TV animated series as like a background character, like one off. So I didn't know much about his origins and stuff. I just knew he was a dude that was half vampire that hunted other vampires,
Well, it's funny
and
you
that was
say the backup characters because in the comics, he's teamed up with the Avengers, X-Men, Spider-Man, and I am saying Spider-Man because there's obviously more than one Spider-Man now.
yeah, right.
He also makes
Spider-Verse.
allies with Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider, and he always helps when he's needed. But I mean, be
Right. I
real,
mean,
who needs a vampire slayer when he's only chasing after one particular vampire most of the time?
well, most of them, yeah. He's fought many other ones. He, ironically, one of the other big vampires in the Marvel universe, is Morbius, the living vampire from the Spider-Man comics originally. So with Morbius, actually, kind of helped Blade in a way during one of their tussles. As you know, vampires again, as we talked about, just like you talked about with Dracula and the Batman thing, sunlight. Apparently, you know, Blade is known as the Daywalker, which it means he can come out during the sunlight and not be hurt. Apparently, this was because Morbius, when they was in a scuffle, bit him. But since Blade has that immunity to being turned by a vampire, instead of it turning him, it just gave him extra vampire abilities and removed his weakness to sunlight, which is fascinating. Again, I don't know really how that works. Like, okay, so you're immune to being turned, but if one does bite you, you just get more powers that takes away weaknesses. I don't know. It's weird. Maybe it kind of reversed and brought more of his human side out, which a human ability is we can walk around in the sunlight for the most part without catching on fire. You stay out there too long without any kind of suntan lotion or sunscreen, then you might feel like you're a vampire being set on
Um,
fire. But
See, in the movies, he was already immune. He comes out straight immune to sunlight.
right, yeah. So see, that's interesting. And like I said, because there's going to be multiple versions, and there have been multiple versions of the character. I know they talked about how when it first started, um, they kind of felt bad because they kind of wrote him kind of in a stereotypical kind of racist type of lot because um and they even admitted that the guys that created and wrote him admitted that they kind of was ashamed of some of the dialogue and stuff that they wrote for him back in the day and the costume choices they made for him. So when they got the chance to like start spinning him off into his own series or into a popular Marvel supernatural series like Midnight Suns, which was a big team up with like Ghost Rider and Blade and Doctor Strange, a lot of these kind of monster hunter things, they took that chance to really rebrand him and make him a more real character and make him more of a fleshed out and actual his own kind of character thing, which I think is fascinating. And like you said, then the movies come along, you always got to kind of, I guess, a development or character development, character growth. and different character versions, which I think is fascinating in this particular um, case. And that's the case with many characters. Like I said, even with the Batman versus Dracula, his character from the 1991 comics, that story was changed, and they made their own version of it for when did the Batman and Dracula come out? That was in like the 2000s, I'm guessing.
When was it? The Blade movies?
No, no, the Batman versus Dracula. I'm just trying to figure out what the range between the comics and the movies for that was.
It was when you remember the Joker that always had that real big giant grin. His hair looked
Yeah,
like
yeah.
jester hair, green. It was on
Right.
WB, so
What year was that? Do we remember around what year? Is it 2000s?
2012 maybe? I don't
Okay,
think
that
we
sounds
were
about
in
right.
school.
No, it was
'Cause I
later. It was much
graduated
later.
in I graduated in '09. You graduated in 10.
2010.
I think
It would have come out after. I think so.
our buddy Atlas was watching it a whole bunch one day
Okay.
when I came over, and I know me and him was working at Walmart together at the time.
Okay, so that
So
makes sense.
I mean, it may have been earlier.
Right.
We
But
can
either
look it
way, that's
up.
what my whole thing. Yeah, my whole thing is I just want to use as an example for like how much things kind of change over time. It was '05
What was it
according to
now?
this. As a 2005 animated superhero
2004,
film based on
actually.
the Batman television series. Well, you're probably looking up the series. I was looking up the actual Dracula movie.
Oh, the movie, yeah, it's probably.
Some interesting voices I didn't know was in. I'm gonna have to watch that movie. But anyhow, we're talking about Blade. What are we talking about? So when did Blade the movie come out? That's a good question.
I want to say it was in the 90s.
The first one was 1998,
Yes, they
and
were
so
set
his
4 years apart on every one, or 4 years from Blade 1 to 2, and then 2 years from Blade to Blade, or Blade 2 to Blade Trinity.
nice.
And
So yeah,
I will
so
say the movies for Blade,
yeah,
interestingly enough, kind of has that same vibe to it that you said with Scream. Scream's got that bar that got set.
yeah,
Blade kind of did the same thing. Like, they set it, and then they tried to match it with each subsequent movie, but they just
yeah.
couldn't capture that magic again.
Couldn't really reach back to it. I still probably watch all three of them. I want to see them just to kind of get that, so I can say I did. Um, so I'm very interested in it. And like I said, I really like Blade. Like I said, I like there's talks. They're actually in works to be doing revamping Blade. Revamping. See what I did there?
Yeah, God.
Over at Marvel Studios. In the MCU, they're wanting to actually. There's rumors that they're going to explore a whole supernatural side in the MCU, and they're going to bring Blade in, Ghost Rider, and eventually set up a Midnight Suns either Disney Plus series or movie, which would be so awesome. I
I'm
love
going to
all of the
say,
supernatural side of things.
you brought up Ghost Rider, and I don't care
Yeah,
what you say. The first Ghost Rider movie was gold.
I liked it.
The
I
second
liked the
one,
first Ghost Rider movie.
eh.
The second was, yeah, like I said, like I would argue Spirit of Vengeance was terrible, but the
Yeah,
first
I
one was
think I would
good.
disagree with you on that. I would have to agree. The first one was
Like,
amazing. The second one, I was like,
yeah,
what
yeah,
is this?
I liked the first one. I thought the first one was kind of ahead of its time with some of the effects and stuff on
Oh,
it.
yeah,
I thought it was
absolutely.
very groundbreaking.
And
Nicolas Cage did a good
yeah,
job.
Nicolas Cage was a really good Johnny Blaze.
I agree, and I will agree with that wholeheartedly. I just that second one we don't talk about.
Yeah,
Um,
although I do like the fact that he started getting what was the angel that was inside Ghost Rider?
I know it's the Spirit of Vengeance, but I don't know the actual name. I can't remember the actual name of it.
Malfiel. Is it Malfiel? Or is that Diablo?
Maybe.
I'm thinking that's probably Diablo.
So speaking of characters that are coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, well, not coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, coming out with movies. For our final character tonight, our final vampiric character, we've already mentioned him a little bit by name already. And we've both mentioned is one of our favorite comic book characters or villains, anti-heroes, however you want to paint him. He's one of both of our favorites already, and so that's why we kind of saved him to really get into this discussion. And before we get too much into the actual uh, showing you some of the slides that we've got here, I do want to show you some of the merch to prove, you know, prove the loyalty going on here. As you can see,
I actually
got
have that.
got this here.
I've got that thing.
Got this one here.
I don't have that.
And also, this was hanging up on the background. It's been hanging up on the background. I took it down just to kind of show off here. So, needless to say, we're big fans of Morbius, the living vampire here. Also, if you've seen the title card and the cover photo over on Facebook, I've actually got Dachi's little character design done up as Morbius. Dachi is Morbius. So Michael Morbius, Doctor Michael Morbius, if you
Yes,
will.
doctor, sir. You get that right.
Doctor, yeah.
Come through his
We
screen and
respect
warp
titles.
your brains.
First appearance, The Amazing Spider-Man, number 101. Which
Dalmatians?
exactly first premiered October of 1979. How fitting! It's October now. Was created by writer. Whoa, why does my thing when I try to move it freaks out, dude? Created by writer Roy Thomas and originally designed by penciler Gil Kane. Despite being originally introduced as a villain, he went on to become a flawed, dark anti-hero in his own series. So Dr. Michael Morbius was a biochemist who was imbued with pseudo-vampiric superhuman abilities and physical traits after a failed biochemical experiment which was intended to cure his rare blood disease. He has a pseudo-vampiric persona, an insatiable lust for human blood, and his subsequent efforts to cure his condition. Um, have kind of just not went well, right? He's got an obsession with wanting to cure it. But this is interesting. So they kind of talked about how it's interesting that he wasn't traditionally turned vampire, because he wasn't bit. That's where the living vampire moniker comes in, right? He wasn't bit and turned. He wasn't drained and turned. It was through experimentation. It was through, like you was talking about, kind of more of a scientific
Well,
turn.
the thing about his, too, and I'm sure it's got it in here, but he's not really looking for blood per se. He wants the plasma in the blood. Because he
Because of his
doesn't.
own blood disease.
I remember in Spider-Man, the one where we were growing up. I don't know what the show was called. It was back in the 90s, whatever.
Animated series. Yeah, Spider-Man the animated
Yeah,
series.
that.
PAS.
He didn't like suck blood out of people. He used his fingertips and had these like suction cup things, and it always freaked me out.
Right. Yeah, it's spooky, right?
But it wasn't the blood he was taking out of him; it was straight plasma,
right.
which I thought
Well,
was neat.
exactly. It's fascinating because he's not your typical vampire, but he's like I said, that's why he's not your typical villain either. And it's interesting too because when I was reading some of the fun facts, right? So one of the fun facts is typically he wouldn't have any quarrel with Spider-Man. The reason he's so obsessed and he always kind of tangles with Spider-Man is that he actually believes Spider-Man's blood may be the key to curing his actual illness once and for all.
Which
And
is weird because Spider-Man's blood is actually toxic as hell to most
radioactive,
people.
right?
Yeah.
But for a time, apparently, some of Peter's blood actually did stop Morbius from being the creature he'd been turned into, but it was only temporary. It's only momentarily, so it's just a temporary cure. But something about the radioactive spider blood, it worked. Something about where his blood was changed, with Morbius's blood being changed, which is kind of fascinating in a way. Now that being said, the two have also teamed up before, on multiple occasions. Obviously, Morbius becoming more of an anti-hero role, and apparently the villain that united them also just had a movie come out was Carnage. Um, Apparently Carnage unites a lot of Spider-Man with a lot of his enemies. Like, he's the worst of the worst. He's the craziest of the crazies, and he causes everybody to have to team up. I mean, it's kind of like X-Men, right? Whenever Apocalypse shows up, that's usually you'll see the X-Men and the Brotherhood and anybody else they fought will all team up to fight Apocalypse because they realize, it's one thing for them to fight for their own causes and stuff, but when you're dealing with somebody that's just that powerful or that insane, you got to work together.
Right.
Other team ups that he's done is like we said before, the Midnight Suns. It actually obviously took place during Morbius's anti-hero days, where he dedicated his life to sucking the blood of criminals rather than innocent civilians. And as you mentioned earlier, we talked about Blade, Ghost Rider, Doctor Strange. However, he did also fight Blade, like we talked about when he bit Blade and gave him his sunlight daywalking abilities. But apparently, there was a time when Blade took on the moniker of Switchblade.
That's
I
a
gotta
real
say,
kind of
real
weird.
inventive there. Yeah, yeah. You just kind of, I'm no longer Blade. Then who are you? Switchblade. Like,
Switching that blade
yeah,
up. Which
right.
I wonder, I didn't look, but in most, like in the movies anyway,
Yeah,
Blade's sword has like a timer on the handle. So if anybody that uses the handle or uses the blade doesn't know it, it'll blast open and cut their fingers off.
that's cool. Well, ironically, you should mention that because in this, he apparently, when he became Switchblade, he had an enchanted blade, which made him merciless, and he killed a lot of people that he could have once called allies or even friends. One of the people that died by his sword was Morbius. Apparently, he did kill Morbius, and actually defeated him and slayed him. However, when the blade of Switchblade was destroyed, it resurrected Morbius. So it did kind of it was a short-lived death, but it actually he did kill Morbius with it. Um and here's an interesting fact. Also, another the last fun fact we have about Morbius kind of ties into what you're saying about the whole finger sucking thing. So much like any vampire, Morbius can, of course, suck the blood of his enemies. He has to be careful what kinds of people or creatures he sucks the blood. However, if those people have gifts of their own, he can sometimes absorb their various powers and abilities, kind of like Rogue in a weird way. It's happened a few times and is truly bizarre when it does happen, as his body can physically change in a number of different ways. We can see this becoming an ability he picks up as the movies go on, maybe. As we know, they are currently in the works of a movie with Jared Leto playing Morbius. Um,
Which is in, I probably had this up on the screen the whole time, but
the
is the middle
Sonyverse,
picture.
right?
Is in the middle
Um,
picture here.
so what's your thoughts on that? Being Morbius fans, what's your thoughts on the new movie?
I have high hopes for it.
Same.
Big
I know
high
there's a
hopes. I
lot of people. It's
hope
kind of back and forth on it.
I hope they keep it more traditional and not go with, because obviously we got the blue costume with the red wings or whatever, red like little glider slits.
Can think, yeah,
Then you got the one where I guess maybe this is when he gets resurrected. It's a black suit instead.
yeah.
Which, I mean, if he goes that route, that would be okay. But hopefully they kind of stay how they've been doing with the other movies, and it just stays more modernized. Because
Yeah, and
some of the
I would
suits
like
I've
that.
seen in the trailer, just like he was wearing actual like business suits or
Right.
doctor suits or whatever, and he just looks very dapper,
Biochemist. Yeah,
a
yeah.
very dapper man before his
And I liked it.
change.
Like I said, I've not watched a lot of Jared Leto stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy over his Joker, and I think that's where a lot of people are kind of nervous about his Morbius. But the trailer looks good. And I don't hold his version of Joker necessarily entirely against him. I think he did the best with what he had. And I'm willing to give it kind of benefit of the doubt thing. So yeah, I'm like you. I'm cautiously anxious and optimistic. Uh, because again, I am a big Morbius fan, which means if he fails, it's going to be that much worse for me because I love Morbius. But if he
Of all
succeeds,
Spider-Man's, like, I wouldn't say
Rogues Gallery.
crossovers because he's not really a
Oh yeah,
crossovers person, I guess. But
yeah,
Morbius was one of the ones, like, when I seen him on there, I was like, oh, this is going to be cool.
yeah,
'Cause I knew it was going to be a
exactly.
really neat episode. Now, one,
It,
one villain I didn't
that's it.
care about much was he had the flat top, like, flat top
Uh,
haircut,
I
and
know who you're talking about.
he could like, headbutt people because he was, like, steel or whatever.
Brimstone.
Yeah, I hated that guy.
Brimstone.
He just
Yeah,
seemed
yeah,
so bland and nothing.
yeah. He was very much just like a foil character, like a character to use as a lackey or a backup character for sure. Yeah. So Yeah, so that's our three that we've done tonight, right? So we've done Blade from the DC universe, Michael Morbius and Dr. Michael Morbius, and Eric Brooks, aka Blade. You got the Daywalker, you got the Living Vampire, you got the Count, so many good ones. And there's some that we didn't even get to. I just want to call reference to, obviously, in the MCU and dealing with Blade, you got Deacon Frost, who was his own character in his own right. You have the Marvel version of Dracula. You have Lilith, who was Dracula's daughter in Marvel Comics. The X-Men, known as Jubilee, became a vampire for a while. I think she still is, but it was a whole big thing when she got turned. And then of course you do have Hell Cow, who is a vampire cow in the Marvel comics. So, so there's many more options that we can get into and discuss.
And on the DC side, you didn't talk about Dr. Langstrom.
Dr. Kurt Langstrom. Well, we may still see him pop up this week later in another category.
Well, the reason I bring him up in this, though, in
Yeah.
the Justice League, I don't even remember what the name
Gods and
of
Monsters?
Gods and Monsters. There we are.
Yep.
He is actually a vampire, but he is the Batman in that universe.
That's very interesting. Like I said, we will definitely dabble into, and like I said, maybe we'll do a two-part feature. Maybe in the episode we're doing later this week, we'll save the vampire stuff for maybe, like I said, hopefully the goal is if we get enough traction from you guys, if you guys respond well enough to this series, to the Heroicon series, to do multiple seasons. In which case, we can do a Vampires Part 2, and we can go into some of these other characters and talk more about those. And I would be more than happy to do that with you guys. I think that'd be fun. I've had a lot of fun doing this episode. Again, we have several episodes planned out. I'm actually going to pull up a list here, and that ways we can maybe tease as soon as my list pulls up. Right. So, let's just go ahead and put it out there. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. So, actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to wait. So here's what I will tell you. There was a clue in this video. There was a clue that was dropped that will give you a hint to what episode 2 is going to be about. And not going to tell you guys what it is. Maybe comment down below in the comments or get up with us.
I don't
and
even know what it is. I think I do.
I'll get with you about it later.
Well,
I can tell you off
really?
camera, but
Really?
but we're going to tease a little bit of the fans here and see how well he's paying attention. We did drop a clue. Like I said, we've mentioned, obviously episode sneak previews and stuff of episodes, and we've mentioned certain characters and stuff, but there was an actual clue in the, I'll even give you a hint. It was towards the beginning of the video, around the beginning of the video. There was a clue to what the next episode is going to be about. Like I said, we're going to be trying to drop one of these episodes each day leading up to Halloween. So hopefully comment down below in the comments and see if you can get it before that episode comes out. And also let us know some of your favorite vampire comic book characters, some of your favorite facts about Blade or Dracula or even Morbius. Some of your thoughts and feelings or ties to these characters. And stay tuned for more heroic haunts here on Not a Sidekick Productions. Any final thoughts, Dotch?
Don't get bit.
Don't get bit.
Stay out of the water, because if you get into a shark's area, you get into their bit, you're gonna get bit. So stay out of the water. I don't know why sharks is a thing, but yeah, I don't like them.
Remember, kids, before you go to bed every night, sharpen your stakes and eat plenty of garlic.